You're live.
Good evening. Today is December 22nd. It's around, and this is a meeting of the Policy School District. I'm Gerald Grupp. I am the chair of the committee, and this evening I am accompanied by 3 other board members and some staff. And we're going to go around the room, and everybody will register their appearance.
Mike Thorward.
Robert Frazier.
Andy Block.
Ed T.
Barry Desco.
Matt Ferguson.
And there are no members of the public nor press here at this time. We have a number of policies to get through this evening. We have some apologies and regrets from a few board members. We are going to try and time box this evening just to spend an hour going through these items. And the initial 3, Dr. Frazier, are tagged with your name. We're going to skip the committee objectives and process and the superintendent input in the interest of time, that there are only 4 of us here tonight. So we're going to try and, where possible, not delve into all of the details because these were provided in advance. Some of them will be brought back for further review because I know that we've had some board members ask specifically around the policies around home education and extracurricular participation of home education students. Those may come back again for discussion at a later date, but let's start our plowing. We're going to, Dr. Frazier, if you wanted to start 100, the comprehensive planning.
I sure will, Mr. Grupp, thank you. Policy 100, comprehensive planning, is a new policy from PSBA. Exemplary policy is verbatim from the PSBA template. Comprehensive planning in the state of Pennsylvania has replaced the strategic planning process. Strategic planning was a 5-year process that all school districts went through. Comprehensive planning is a 3-year process. You'll recall that we just had our plan approved last November, 13 months ago. And our new comprehensive plan is in effect from July 2016 through June 2019. So for some context, that's what this policy is in reference to. So under authority, you'll see stakeholders represented here, board members, administrators, teachers, other district personnel such as specialists, students, parents, guardians, representatives from local businesses, and the community. Students is an interesting one that they have it in the policy because they do not, they being PDE, the Pennsylvania Department of Education, does not require students to be part of the comprehensive planning process. So that's an interesting inclusion in their sample policy here. And then beyond that, really the body of this policy includes 6 different separate subsets of professional education, teacher induction, student services, special education, gifted education, and then we have this delegation of responsibility section down at the bottom.
Dr. Frazier, can I interrupt you just to ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Just for clarity on those titles. So the way I took this to read, and I don't know if I'm right, professional education would be the ongoing education of our staff and administration.
That's right.
Induction would be onboarding of teachers.
That's right.
So special ed and gifted, I'm familiar with. It feels like we're leaving out something in the middle. So is that student services?
Student services, the header is at the bottom of page 1, but the body of that is on the top of page 2.
Okay, so, but that's what that is. That would encompass students in their totality, so that middle piece that's not gifted or special ed would.
Yes, that's right.
Okay,
That's
got
right.
it. Okay, thank you.
And for each of these, you see the duration of those specific sub-plans. So professional education is 3 years. Induction is actually a 6-year plan. Student services is also a 6-year plan, as is gifted education. And then special education is also a 3-year plan. According to Chapter 4 regulations, once the comprehensive plan is written in total, as well as each individual set, then a copy of that plan has to be made available at the district office as well as at the nearest public library for a period of at least 28 days for public inspection and public input. So you see that notation included under each of these subset plans as well. So in summary, that is policy 100, comprehensive planning.
So in short summary, it's really with each of the 6 areas, it's the obligations of law to develop a plan, get it approved by the board, and submit it on a certain time schedule defined by the state, and publish. The only thing I would add, and I don't here, but at least is that we would also at the same time publishing them and putting them into the public library, would be to publish them, maintain them on our website, both 28 days for the 28 days prior to their approval, as well as an archival item for the public to review.
That's right.
One of the other board members asked to get a copy of the current plan. I guess he could have sent you a note and asked for that, but he asked me to.
Isn't it
ask for
posted?
that.
It is posted on
It's
the
posted
website,
online.
and I will send that out.
I just thought I'd read, Bill wanted it read into the record, so Bill asked that we send him a copy. It's on the.
Under authority, you said PD does not require that. Why is PSBA putting it?
I'm
And are
not
we
sure-
notifying this authority and should we?
I'm not sure why they're including it. I have not reached out to them to ask them that question.
We actually are under the authority, we're adding students here. Forgive me if that gets a little bit of heartburn tonight.
Now, we're a year removed from this process, so unless they've started to, we're going to check on. But the last time I've personally been through this process, students were not required.
Interesting question, because similar to the diversity work that, we've talked about, and just feedback I've gotten in general, to have student input on that. I don't think it's a bad, but to your point about authority, and
I don't think it's bad either.
do we need to call it out, or if we do call it out, does that mean we're required to do something? I think it's good to get.
We'll back up through that phrase in its entirety. There is one word or a short phrase to change prior to that, which is, and shall ensure active participation.
Yeah,
that is an impossible thing because the board does not have dominion over many of the personnel involved here. We do not have dominion over the parents to tell them they must actively participate. Not that I anticipate they would, but so it should be actually to actively to invite and encourage the active participation, because we can't ensure.
Shall encourage would.
That's fine too,
Yeah,
whatever.
So I'm going to change that?
Would you please? Because I don't see it as, we can't ensure it.
And just as one point of notation here, whenever we submit the plan, there are certain stakeholder groups, those who are listed here, with the exception of students, who we have to indicate who those individuals were who were part of this process, or else the plan will not be approved. So what is active involvement or not active involvement? Or active participation? That's up to each place to presume, I guess, but
If we have to
we do
list
have to
them,
include them as part of the process.
we are required to.
We are.
Okay. Representatives from local businesses?
We are.
The last
Yeah.
several times
We
we've
have-
done strategic planning, we have always had students participating. We've always had local businesses. Everyone listed on here has been part of all strategic.
Do we list
planning.
them by name?
Yes, we do.
It's a privacy matter.
Mike, are you done?
I'm done.
Okay, so I have just one more question. So it said the board, the way I read this policy is that the administration, along with all these other stakeholders, and the board may or may not be actively involved, it says we encourage our own involvement, develops the plan, right, that the goals, and then seeks board approval and then PD approval. Up here it says the board shall provide guidance. So I guess my question is, what does that look like in practical application versus you driving this process, then coming to us? This intimates to me, we start with something to you and then you go from there. Is that how this is supposed to read? I don't know that that's.
I think it's more on the
My intent.
process. What the process that we would use to drive the formulation of this plan and all the community conversations that take place in the lead up to it. The board would provide guidance into that process, as opposed to the plan itself, because we will have board members as part of our stakeholder groups as well. So that's how that input will be provided into the content of the plan.
Okay, so it's not the board taking some kind of action or giving you goals first
No.
that you go then run with.
No.
The guidance is just supporting you through the process and ultimately approving it.
Exactly. Because the way this
Or feedback on
process
the
is set
outputs.
up is it starts with a needs assessment,
Okay. That's
a holistic needs assessment.
For me, I don't see a real tremendous problem here. It's codifying what's required in law.
Yeah.
However, we're
I just had a question, just because we're going into the goals and planning.
Where possible, I don't like codifying law because it just means we get into an extra cycle. We'll talk about that the next one, but, so we'll go forward with that. The next time, we'll go for that for endorsement. I don't know what we call it, second read. This was first read, and this changes weren't substantive, so we'll do it on second read now. District mission statement.
Okay, so this is essentially replacing what was written with our current mission statement. So that's a start. And then in our current policy 101, we also have a philosophy of education. So that philosophy of education, which is rather lengthy in our existing 101, has been removed. And the reason for that, according to PSBA, is that in the new Chapter 4 regulations, this language is now part of a vision statement and a shared value statement, as opposed to a mission statement. And this policy is specific to a mission statement. So this very well might be the shortest policy that we would potentially have.
One sentence. That's
Except for the ones we removed.
One sentence.
I'm sorry, one set,
Policy 101.
On one,
right? I'm looking at 101. It looks like a front and back page.
And I can tell you that
that's the old,
That's the old.
Oh, that's the old one.
the new one's just textual.
Oh, sorry, he handed this to me and I noticed that it's that. Yep.
You know, this was one of these things that board retreats in the past, we sat and struggled with these. You know, I somewhere in my mind, I have that some board members will come forward and want to, you know, try and push, you know, for a more robust or more comprehensive. I don't know how we do that, and it means you wind up either ignoring it or rewriting it constantly. So one or the other, and we don't tend to rewrite these frequently. So we tend to ignore them.
And typically when they are rewritten, it's through that comprehensive planning process. Policy
Oh.
100.
That makes sense.
That's when they get rewritten typically.
See, that the only thing I miss in this district mission statement is it is entirely, that may be law, it's entirely focused on students. And as a district, we have a obligation, responsibility to our community, and we do that differently. So it's, you know, it's actually somewhere in here, there's an obligation for what we're producing our students to do for our communities. You know, this is fine as it is, but that's just the subtlety that's being lost. That, you know, we do a number of things. If this is our mission statement, a number of things we do, we don't need to do according to that. You know, the things that we do for Alex Lemonade, for this charity. You know, now you could say that you're developing habits and attitudes to become lifelong learners, but those are not encompassed in this.
well, I see lead and serve, so, I mean, I don't know, I hear what you're saying,
That's all. I just, you know, I'm not trying to recreate the Boy Scouts here.
right.
You know, but I just want to give it voice. It doesn't speak to some of the other things this district does, which makes it a little unique.
And we've had this mission statement for a good decade now. Is that correct?
20 years.
Perhaps longer? A while. We've had
Yeah, it was
a while.
updated in a previous
Strategic planning process.
yeah, and not the most recent one.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just,
So we'll choose it.
so I'll live with it. I just think that it's one of those things that maybe it's some, to be expedient, we'll go with it from my perspective. But
Serve is a big word to me, you know, serving leadership and serving, I mean,
2006.
And the old mission statement was actually one sentence too.
Yeah, it's about,
Yeah, so it's
the
not,
rest was philosophy.
yeah. Which we're saying goes somewhere else.
It goes in that comprehensive plan.
Right, right.
It does. And typically, when there's a change, it's done through that process, so that you have all those different stakeholders
Right.
as part of co-authoring that
Oh.
mission statement.
Sure.
That's the idea behind it.
And that's sort of the umbrella or foundation.
Right. So it's not just administration writing it, or,
Yeah.
so this change here, you know, where you're seeing the strike-through language.
Yep.
That is really just because this policy was out of date. It did not have the correct mission statement in policy 101.
Ah,
So this is not a new this is not a new mission statement for us. We've had this mission statement. The new
So-
language, we've had this mission statement for years.
good.
Yeah, you can see how much.
In this policy?
You can see how much of a difference it makes for being something.
Yeah.
Are we required to have a mission statement?
We are according to Chapter 4 regulations, yes.
And this is as good as any.
All right.
So that's that. Got one more, all right.
Before we
Policy
go too deep in this, let me ask, are we obligated to have a policy on charter schools? Because everything written here is excerpted from law. And if it's excerpted from law, law prevails whether we have a policy or not. And so what does this protect us for that we're not already obligated to for law? That's, sorry to ask the question.
I don't know that, but you're correct. We have statutory coding pretty much at the end of every single line in this policy. Mr. Frederickson, do we want to ask that question? The PSBA? If we're required to have this policy?
I will do that.
See, because I have here too, like in the second page, the fourth paragraph down, the board may approve of leave of absence
thank
of
you,
up to
Jerry.
5 years,
That's where I was going.
which and we may, but I don't have to write it down because
Do we have to though?
do we have, well, up here that, somewhere that, according to this, whatever reference 9 is, which would PS 172.4-A, that if we may, but if I may, then I may not too. And the board has its traditionally grant tenure to temporary. So, and lastly, the other one was transportation. It's a total lift. We already have on the next page. We have that obligation, independent of charter school or not. If it's an approved LEA, I think it has to be approved LEA. Maybe not, maybe private schools can do it. We have to transport within 10 miles of the outside boundaries of the school district. So I hate to cut it short, but if there's nothing here that isn't already by law, then I don't want to have it unless it puts us in a spot that someone brought a charter to us and we said, you know, I wouldn't want something to come through on a pocket approval because we don't have a policy. But I
Well,
don't see
of
this
course, yeah, or makes it easier to approve, or then requires us, and this is just where I, the whole idea of letting one of our teachers go to another school with tenure and then hold their position for them because they want to go chase something. I'm not a big fan of that either. So, if this policy lets with him have some more control, then I would be in favor with it, but I just don't know if it does that.
So we'll defer this,
At this point, we'll pen this
and I'll find
waiting
out whether or not it's required.
input from council.
Okay.
Are we good with that?
Yes.
Cool. 121 talks about field trips. Barry, I think this is going to be your joy tonight.
Yes, so what you have is what PSBA revised from our current policy. Most of it was just some change in language that was highlighted. These are trips that are specific to curricular-related activities as opposed to extracurricular activities. The one point that I wanted to bring before the board was my strike through under authority, where it says the board shall approve annually a list of potential field trips, which is part of our current policy, but we do
Yes.
not do that in practice. So if that were to be there, I mean, my only suggestion would be if that is a desire of the boards, that we put some definition around that because they're ongoing. It wouldn't be a single board approval because they happen throughout the year. And and the great majority of our trips are those trips that would be pretty typical of what a board would expect, down to historic sites of Philadelphia, going to Doylestown, going to the Churchill Nature Center, et cetera. So if there is a desire on the board's part, I would just suggest that we put some language in there that would define what you're looking for to have approved, unless you want every trip coming before you for approval.
Barry and I spoke about this in the hallway before the meeting. There's certain defines that occur de rigueur as part of our policy process anyhow. The example he gives is Churchill Nature. The other example, and because this actually is curricular activities, but I have a concern that we're putting kids on buses for co-curricular activities. Now, I would defer in a policy like this to say something along the lines of the children being transported to league events and leagues that we participate in. Those are by definition defined because we've deferred to the league to define appropriate venues. And even some of the trips that we have baked in, the kids go to Hershey in 8th grade each year, they go to Hershey. We know those, we can define a bunch of those up front. Almost an administrative reg that says these are covered and get that approved on a renewable basis, so it's just, you don't have to come forward. But then you get the one-offs, where we have the example, certainly we probably would have approved it, but, in past years, certainly not this year, but in past years, the choirs went down to the White House. They traveled down there. It would have been nice to know that we had students, together or something, we would have a clue what's going on. It's always terrible to be last to know when those things happen. So to your point, Barry, I think we can define a realm of these things that the board's aware of just because they're built in the curriculum. Again, Bill sent a letter to all board members by email today. He did not want to delete the board approval. I disagree with it because we're approving everyone bit by bit is going to drive us a little bit.
Yeah, and these things, Jerry, some are static and predictable, and others not so much. I would hope that within the administrative regulations, you or a designee, as it states in here, is approving those. You are the experts of those. I do not believe we should approve those. So but as a function of scratch, to go through the rest of the policy and change some words, because as you look just down two paragraphs, the board does not endorse, support, nor assume responsibility in any way for the district staff member to take students on trips not approved by the board. So there's just some redundancy in language you might want to clean up.
Only because it said board or superintendent designee. So, we could strike board and just leave superintendent or superintendent.
Right, if the board, and then I didn't pull them out. I just said, hey, if we're pulling the board off there, then we're really taking the board out of all this. It popped up again. This is the administration of medication. The board directs planning for field trips to start early in the school year. Is that all the administration, or is that
just the board part of the problem, where it says the board directs and the board of them?
There's one other medication too.
So you see what's saying, the board there, the board here?
The board does not endorse.
No, well, I think below it where it says approved by the board.
They took
Okay, that one's
it
out,
says
right?
by the superintendent designee.
And then down the bottom of the medication, the board directs the planning filters.
it said the administrative regulation should direct planning?
See, that's an interesting challenge because
How much is planning for?
Well, now, because, now I will tell you on the senior trips, a nurse accompanies the group, it's a large group. Let me ask, I'm not asking, we sent the kids down for the day to Washington DC in past years. If one of those kids needs medication, who's taking that, who's transporting that, normally that's under the domain of the nurse. But there may not be a nurse going on all these trips, so I'm not sure how that.
Well, that says under, it'll be done in conjunction with board policies.
Yeah,
So do we have policy anywhere else that
Well,
says that? Is
we
there
have
a
to
question?
look at that, because I don't think the board policy permits, except for maybe EpiPens. Students at a certain point can possess their own. EpiPens are one of them, asthma inhalers are one of them. But beyond that, students aren't allowed to possess their own.
I just filled one out. There was a field trip for the sixth graders today. I can't remember who on it.
So that's one thing we need to look at and understand, because it's great to reference it, but we need to look at that.
Is the case.
And the other one, which causes me great angst,
I take out board, put in the superintendent or superintendent.
No, I would say administrative, superintendent.
And,
Okay, yeah.
and they're really addressed in the 200 policies. 210 is use of medications, and 210.1 is possession, use of asthma inhalers and other self-administered medications. So maybe it should just reference those.
210 is easy, the first one, or the second one, the self-administered, that's easy, because we've already cut that area out for EpiPens, asthma inhalers for kids. If they're traveling, they're carrying them, they're allowed to.
Right.
Who's taking, an anti-seizure medication, Tegretol, maybe he's taking ADHD medication, which has a potential for abuse. And typically the nurse retains those because there's also some logging going on as it's dispensed. So I don't know what to do with that. I don't want to put a burden on our staff regarding medication, but I want to know what we're doing with it. So the other one that causes me great angst is at the bottom of this. Angst because this is going on now, and it's not something the board is aware of. This is that the board does not endorse or assume responsibility in any way for a district staff member takes superintendent designate. No staff member may solicit district students for such trips within district facilities or on district grounds without board permission. Now, maybe this isn't what you were addressing before, but my problem here, of course, is pick a language. There have been instances in the past where the language teacher at a high school most typically will take the kids on a trip, into the country of the language. That's solicited through the school, and we've never been informed of that.
So, and I just wanted to, you and I had this conversation, I couldn't remember what it was, but 231.1 under pupils is unsponsored activities trips. So that's where that is defined for those kinds of trips that you just referenced.
Okay.
So,
Good, but this still has, this is still violated with some regularity, that they are solicited, and what causes me the angst on this is there is some component of profit in this for the person arranging it, whether it is just their own travel is included, or whether they are making a cut off the numbers. I'll go to the first one first, which I think is the more usual case. They get to go to wherever it is. So I agree with this policy. Thank you, Barry, for the connection with 231.
So Barry, do we leave within that policy you just noted? Does the board have to provide permission to that, to where this policy reads correctly, or does it say district grounds without board permission? Can you change board permission to superintendent or designate?
I don't believe it needs, let me just pull it up and look exactly what it says.
So while you're looking that up, my point would be on this from an administrative process is if it's going to be advertised, then that advertisement must include the date of the board approval of the trip.
Based upon how it's written now.
Yeah, that their advertisement, their notice to
Right.
students says, while this is not endorsed, we just have to come up with a cover letter, cover paragraph at the bottom says, while this is not a school activity, the board has acknowledged that this is being solicited June 12th meeting. That way I have minutes, we have minutes that ties it back. When it's distributed without that, it gets really clear real fast. I just worry about it.
So in answer to your question, they are principal approval followed by superintendent.
So the board doesn't,
The board is not
so
involved.
so that, so that,
Trips. That's-
so that.
So I should change board to superintendent or superintendent designee. Right there, so what I'm hearing.
I'm thinking to take it back and try and build a model of what is normally included that goes to that level. and just build up to what the level is that requires the approval of, you could build in as we said, the sports through leagues that we're participating in.
This one's gonna need another reread.
I think it will, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, is build it up so that way the administration can do the approvals of the ones that are routine or more aligned, but the ones that are not, because we approve the contracts for the senior trips. So is that our approval of the trip? I guess it is, but, we don't approve the contract for the band going to name a foreign country. I don't think we approve those. And actually, by the way, those are announced to the band before they're told to us where they're going.
Well, that trip is sponsored by the band parents or music parents, technically.
Well, then let's go with this idea that same thing, that an outside organization or an affiliated organization that's arranging a trip for students as students.
Must obtain board approval.
Exactly.
Does it have to be board approval though?
In 2001, we got into a dispute about whether it was, I don't know if it was England or Florida, where the kids were going after September 11th, and would they be transported or not? We got into it, it was a major topic of discussion,
Right.
because the administration had said they were going to put it on hold, and truthfully, the board needed to support the administration in making that decision, rather than leaving the administration hanging out to dry with that one. It should have fallen to the board. It did ultimately. So I think there's some.
Well, I think there's something in there about, I hear you saying loud and clear, you want to be aware more so than you might be today. And is there a way to write in there, the board reserves the right to have an opinion on?
I just asked Matt maybe to pull that one up to give you some context as you're trying to connect the two.
Social events and.
I get what you're getting at. I guess maybe I just don't personally feel the need to micromanage
Yeah,
our educational trips through the administration or the parent groups. If we're not liable, Jerry, I don't necessarily see the need to get.
Yeah, the veil of not being liable is very thin. You have your staff members taking kids on these trips. It's a very thin veil.
Well, and they're advertised in our schools. So,
This is the policy that would cover the band trips.
yes.
See, the sponsor may be a member of the district staff, is that?
Does it say board approval for the band?
Well, it also doesn't cover that
It says here the
Principals
Principal?
and superintendent.
the principal will then forward through the administrative channels to superintendent.
And then the rest
Do you
is.
see all these?
We do.
I do.
It also doesn't, that one also doesn't address that we have to pay for the substitutes for those happening.
Yeah, but superintendent's got a budget he's following, and he takes that into account when he's making that. I should say he, but the administration, I would imagine, takes that into account.
I'm just saying, we're sending staff members and we're not, and they're going.
No, I hear you. I respect where you're coming from.
Extra.
Once we made a decision on the budget, and, then it's, we've got a staff to manage that.
That's not my point.
I understand, I understand.
So we're clear. This is a benefit accruing to a small group of students who elect to do this at their own expense, and the district is subsidizing it.
Well, that sort of touches on my concern,
Anybody can do.
which is
stuff
not
like this.
necessarily about band trips, but about some other trips is, and even sports too, is we're asking a lot from families in terms of money.
Oh, yeah.
And if your kid's in the band, and enjoying the band, does that automatically mean that you've got to pony up X dollars because the band is going to Europe? And at what point do we start putting an unfair burden on some families to, it's almost keep up with the Joneses type thing? And do we put that all on the superintendent, or at what point does the board start to make judgments about what's excessive and what's not?
I have tried that for the past
Did you?
years, and, you know, there's a predominance of, well, it's the kid's senior year. Well, I don't think, just candidly, I don't think our board has a great representation, blessed as we are, from a diversity perspective
Right.
of persons struggling.
A modest means.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, you know, there's senior trip, but there's also all these band trips.
There's senior trip, there's prom, there's, if you're junior or senior year, if you're interested in one of these things, orchestra or band, you're going somewhere,
Yeah.
because they go every other year.
So I said,
There's
Yeah.
trips.
It's not a cheap thing to be a senior in Council Run.
it's not a cheap thing to be a Council Rock student. It's just something here,
Well, 231 is not on the list tonight.
No, there was, I think, whether or not you want to, what you want to include.
but I don't
in-
think board approval is necessary for field trips. Personally,
Educational field trips.
educational field trips covered by this policy, right?
So we'll bring this back for another first read, the next one?
I want to make sure I know what you're expecting. in it.
Yeah, I think I'm the short one on this one. I think-
Yeah, basically, we made the changes around the board, I'm good to go.
Yeah, I think I'm on the short side of this one, so it's. All these other guys prevail.
31.
No, we can work on 231.
It's okay, Jerry. Jerry, I appreciate every time you said you're having one profound angst. What kind of angst do you have down there?
I have lots of angst. I have angst and agita, the things I have the most of. You have kids, you don't have any.
Yeah.
Extracurricular activities,
So this.
122.
Yes, so this was, again, PSBA's update of our current policy that defines extracurricular activities in our schools. Draw your attention to a couple of changes that I made to theirs. You move under definitions. I scratched the areas related to cheerleading. The reason I did that was when this policy was written, cheerleading was not a PIAA sport. It is now a PIAA sport. So it would fall under an interscholastic athletics policy rather than a extracurricular activity. And the next area where I made a change is under delegation of responsibility. And I don't know if this was in there because of the cheerleading, but we don't currently follow this protocol for extracurricular activities. So if you were to look at an intramural activity, we would not go through the concussion and traumatic brain injury information and sudden cardiac arrest and require those protocols that we follow through interscholastic athletics with extracurricular activities, because there is a separate policy on interscholastic athletics.
Right, and just so we're clear, extracurricular activities would, it says specifically athletic activities.
Pardon me?
No, I was thinking outside, I was trying to make sure this didn't include, if you were in the chess club, as it was written, if you were in the chess club and you needed to have concussion and traumatic brain injuries, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do have intramural activities. You could have an intramural basketball program. We don't currently do that for these. They're not at the same level. They're not the same level of competition because everything's internal. You're not running through typical practices. So those protocols are required through PIAA for interscholastic athletics. And if we wanted to do that, that would be quite a change in practice and pretty significant change because of the numbers of kids that participate and what it would necessitate on the part of our staff to go through these protocols, because they're pretty extensive.
And let's differentiate this for a second, which is the intramural don't typically include a trainer present,
Correct.
and they don't have a coach, they have an advisor.
Correct.
So it's a different skill set in terms of what that person would do. Now, coaches, we're pretty rigorous about this. Our coaches go through these and they're familiar with these and
Right.
our trainers are, that would be a different level of, a wholly different level of service.
The, under definitions right at the top. And I'm thinking sports here, we cut people. It's no longer are equally.
And I had a question about that under the other, the athletic stuff, not this one.
We're codifying something we're not really doing there.
I read that as equally available. In other words, all students have an opportunity to access it, but they may not all make a particular.
Okay.
Actually, that's how you read it, but sometimes a program doesn't run it north, sometimes it doesn't run it south. At our middle school level, we sometimes don't have,
Yeah,
we're not fielding a team for X or Y, where
yeah.
at Richboro maybe, because there weren't enough students, but we're running it at Holland and Newtown.
Those two words gave me,
Yeah, I mean, again, my thinking of it was, as I read it, that's not. They wrote.
I know where you're going.
Right, 'cause I was saying, we make it accessible at all three middle schools. If there's not enough students to run, then it doesn't run. So it was equally accessible, but there weren't enough students to justify it running.
Let me just add the caveat within that building, within an individual school. Because if you don't want the program, you don't want the program.
I got you.
well, what if we offer the program, we still don't let people do it? Cheerleading being one of them.
What do we do?
Not everyone that wants to participate in cheerleading gets to participate.
I thought it was no cut. It's not no cut.
No, that's not true.
It is or it is not?
It is not.
And that's why and that's fine, as we implement it, but we kind of codified something else here, I fear.
Yeah, now, again, I want to make sure we differentiate between interscholastic athletics and like, in other words, if we're running an intramural basketball program, there's not a tryout and a cut.
Okay.
So now it may not run if you only have 3 kids that want to sign up, because you can't run a program, but
Intramural.
intramural,
So eighth grade soccer,
that's interscholastic.
that's interscholastic.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to ask, what are some, this goes back to me for board approval. I don't recall ever approving, shame on me, any extracurricular activities specifically.
You do through the EDR.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that where we approve those?
It's where you're approving the person to be paid to do them.
No, okay, but I don't really say, hey, we're going to run these things. I know that we approve the people running those all the
That's
time.
where we're.
That's what because it says that we have to require them,
We pay
and then we have to do something else down here, and it goes back to that. Okay, what's the, is this really the role of the board to be involved in?
Right, the requirement is that the interplay of the items is that all these extracurricular activities and co-curricular activities. We like the term extracurricular, or are they co-curricular? Can we pick a word?
Yeah, I mean, where you say here, any correction. We could,
Well, and it's recommended, what happens is it's recommended through the EDRPP, because if we were to restrict it, I mean, for years, we ran a hockey team at South, that we didn't run the hockey team. That was a private club that just happened to city council run. And we didn't have any part of it. We didn't have any, but now we have a hockey team, don't we? We don't have, still don't have lacrosse.
We do have
Lacrosse, we didn't have that initially. Sorry, apologies to Deputy Deppy, or Corporal Deppy, he was the one who pushed that. Yeah, so that's, once we approve, then
just sounds like we're approving clubs, not, this reads to me like we're approving the activity, not the.
This would not be a sport. This would not be a new sport unless it was an intramural.
Right, but we would never see, if you added something intramural or another club or whatever it was, we wouldn't be approving that, we'd just be approving the resource that would be.
Right, the actual title of the program is next to the EDRPP name. So it would say intramural basketball, it would say weight training.
Okay, so we're doing what this says then, specifically.
now we're gonna get to it later, but let me ask as a preview, if you will. In a little bit, we're gonna talk also about 137 and the extracurricular activities regarding charter school, Violet Charter, forget that. Right, that's homeschool.
And charter, yes.
Are homeschool students permitted in our something curricular activities?
They are if they request to be so.
Okay. So it's just, I was just asking for my own, because I know, for a competitive sport, they could be. I knew that for sure. But for the or extracurricular activities, they can also be.
Yeah, I recall reading that in one of these policies, and I don't know if it was the charter policy or not, but they're responsible for their own transportation, correct?
Yes.
To our site.
Right.
Correct. And we, with charter schools, and I guess we can look at that when we get to it, and we can charge a fee, but they can only participate if they're allowed for that same activity.
Right. Anything else on 122 that we need to think about here? So students will pay for their travel associated with it themselves. What's the way, non-instructional time outside by school? What's the reference? I'm not picking up why we have the reference to non-instructional time at the bottom of the page. Is that picked up from somewhere else?
Oh, yeah, the prior sentence, the first sentence of that prior paragraph, it says, meet on school premises during non-instructional time for the purpose of conducting a meeting within.
Meaning they can't, in the middle of education time, have a meeting.
Right,
Specific people access,
right.
yes.
So that's
Now, it's interesting to me because, I just asked, because at the high schools, the students are really corralled prior to, because it talks here about before actual classroom instruction. Yeah, that's just, they're kind of corralled to the cafeterias before school day starts, right? So I guess it can be from there.
Yeah, some of these groups, this equal access piece would be student-initiated groups that are not school-sponsored, but we provide them a space and an adult to supervise them, not to instruct them, not to do anything other than to provide adult supervision while they meet.
Right, the typical, EG that's used in conversation about this would be a coalition of children who wish to pray.
Fellowship, they can meet in the school, they may arrive at 6:30, we provide a room, they must find an adult who will supervise them, the adult does not.
That adult does not
They
receive
do not
EDRPP.
participate, no, they do not.
They do not get
That's
EDRPP either.
correct.
We have no touch on
That's
that.
correct,
And the adult has to be a member of staff.
yes.
So where are we with this? This goes through as we saw it with the minor discussion points or corrections that were made today?
I'm good.
Agreed? Andy? Andy was the thumbs up. Uh, 123, interscholastic athletics.
This would be our secondary school interscholastic athletic program. Again, PSBA's revisions to our current program. I would draw your attention to, under delegation of responsibility, a couple of strikes that I made. Again, they do not currently happen. If the board would desire those to happen, we probably need some guidance on doing that. So it speaks about including a board-approved schedule of events and informing the board of changes in that schedule as they occur. As you well know, changes in athletic schedules happen all the time, like they just did this past weekend. So,
We don't need,
yeah, so that's why I put a strike through those, not thinking that.
do you need to see that?
What? I'm sorry, I was reading.
The changes in schedules.
Again, it goes to that point that it's delegated to, it's delegated to a league that we participate in, so.
Well, that's why we have athletic directors too.
Correct. What I paused about was, I was reading I was reading on the first page under authority, the third paragraph, which talked about we shall determine these standards of eligibility, and such standards shall student and included be covered by student accidental insurance, by student accident insurance. Now, that was something we added as a board years ago. I wonder why that is listed here. Because that was not a requirement. That was, we chose a number of years ago to buy a student accident and injury policy.
Secondary to,
Actually, primary.
no, I think the way it happens is and we would need Bob to answer that. My understanding, the way he's done it with previous claims against it, was that it picks up any cost not covered by the family's
Insurance.
primary insurance.
Right.
Yes, they pick up the difference. Now, maybe that's because they've already submitted and are just submitting the claims of what's not covered. But I'd have to ask Bob.
But I wonder why that's included here in the model. And because is that,
Well, they
do we
cite that
obligate
one.
people to have insurance?
I don't think this is just a complete model. I think this is a rewrite of our policy, is it
No,
not?
ours didn't have that.
Didn't it?
I don't think it did.
I thought it did.
Well, it could
The
have.
PIAA sets forth a number of requirements that must be followed. And it does say each student be covered by accident insurance on the current policy.
It does?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's odd, because we added that as our choice.
This was revised in 2012, so that may have been a
Yeah.
revision. I would have to cross-reference the PIAA site to see what that terminology is.
Right, because I understand the physical examination, I understand degree of injury, but that they're covered by student accident insurance, I don't understand that, because if a student is injured and they have generalized health insurance at home, is there a carve out in my employer provides health insurance. If I had a child who's playing competitive sports, or carve out in the policies against injuries in competitive sports, or is that included? So it seems strange that they would have to have a student accident insurance versus just medical coverage.
Yeah, I can't recall.
I'm not gonna hold it up on that, but I would like some clarification, that's all. That's-
I'll find out. I'll look at what PIAA's exact wording is, because that looks to me, and I don't know for sure, but the way it's written there, that looks like it's a pullout from PIAA, the way.
I agree, but it actually sounds like it's defining a brand
It does.
almost,
Mhm.
where other insurance might cover it.
Yeah, specific category of insurance.
Exactly, where I may have a more blanketed
Yeah.
policy.
Oh, okay.
The,
Jerry, one second.
Go ahead.
23. There it is, added PSBA recommended language on required standards of student accident insurance and physical examination for students. So it's PSBA's language.
yeah,
PSBA's recommended.
but they're recommending something which maybe can be rephrased, that if you want to make sure that they have coverage for medical injuries incurred, that would be different than specifying they must have, because as it's written there, it sounds like a line of coverage that PSBA offers, and it's self-serving.
The only thing I would say is if we're gonna put that in there, then we better check. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not convinced we are currently checking for
Okay,
insurance.
so we'll ask what they mean.
I would think that's where, well, you know what, it's like automobile insurance, there are two ways you can buy auto insurance, responsibility.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
large companies,
Yeah,
J&J, we didn't buy auto insurance, we had evidence of financial responsibility papers in our cars.
So,
Same thing here.
so for this policy, I will check with PSBA to find out what that language means. And Barry's going to check with PIAA to find out if it's a requirement, and we'll defer this policy until the next meeting.
Or it may resolve one way or the other. And if you get the sense that it simply requires that they have coverage for medical injuries or for injuries during the sport, we can craft the language and then bring it forward with that. That would be fine from my perspective. What's the opportunities report? Is that new?
That's the Title IX report,
That's
correct?
the Title IX.
Is that the one we released?
That's what I read it to be.
Up there under the authority piece again, I'm not familiar with the word practicable. I assume they mean practical.
No, it's practical.
Is it practicable?
Yeah.
Okay, good one. Gotta go back to school. I didn't do homework.
I'll go with you.
But it goes back to Mike's initial question about providing equal access, yet a lot of these sports are tryout sports. I mean, if you're saying everybody has the ability to try out, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily say everybody wants to play soccer, gets to play soccer. So I'm not, are we
I
okay?
see this one as being more like, we have a wrestling team and on the women's wrestling.
Are you talking about the first sentence? Under authority?
No, I say, the practicable.
Oh.
Under that, but in here it said, determine eligibility, the boards will determine the standard of eligibility to be met by blah, blah, blah. No, that's not the one. We're the ones that says we'll make them equally.
Well, that was on the
Okay, so the equality here piece is only male and female.
That's correct.
It's not.
Yes.
Okay.
We're looking at the quality status.
first sentence under
Yep.
authority.
Sorry you brought it up, guys. I just wasted 3 minutes.
60 seconds.
You know, I found it interesting in the next one, but we're not back, which is even if the property is not of this board, we have to make sure it's kept free from hazardous conditions. I thought that was just kind of interesting and burdensome. I might have to see the law to know what they're actually requirements to do.
So this one's tabled until we check the insurance.
You know, it's tabled unless they find that the language can come forward that says, produce other, you know, to document other coverage, medical coverage.
Yeah.
That would cover for injuries sustained. I'll agree, it's a good thing. The person should have, before they compete, have medical coverage that would cover in the event of injury sustained during the competition.
And that's what they do. They provide a copy of their insurance card or their policy number as part of their packet that they submit that they have insurance.
Then the wording here was
So
wrong.
we do
And
check
the wording here was wrong.
Well, as I said, that's what they put, that's PSBA's language. So we'll check and see why they elected that term versus ours.
The next, everybody good with that? So we're going to probably not see that, but there's a potential we'll see it if they can resolve the language.
Yeah.
131 is religion in schools.
Do we
Are
skip
we
it
skipping
to
26?
I didn't see class size in the email, but
Sorry.
I did.
No, because it wasn't in.
I'm perfectly
No,
happy
no, I'm sorry.
to address
That's
it.
short, yeah.
I'm perfectly happy with what you put in.
Well, the only thing that I changed is class size shall be determined by the board. And we have class size guidelines. I would suggest adding class size guidelines.
Percent, yeah.
That would be the only thing I would.
Class size guidelines here.
Good idea. Good idea.
And really, everything about this is then defined in the EAR that accompanies this.
In
The
the,
class size guidelines are defined in the administrative regulation that attaches to this policy.
yeah, I'd like to keep this a little,
Like it is.
yeah, because, you know, we are looking at what we're doing here in the next few years.
So what did you put up?
I said class size guidelines shall be determined by the board after consultation with the superintendent, designated administrators and principals.
And the only, and you know what, forgive me for this, but this comes back to that advise, and I don't know if I want to put it here, but I want to give it some thought for a second, which is that we produce guidelines, and those guidelines really are, in essence, what the board has projected as a maximum. And all, as a board, we typically request from the superintendent is notification in advance when those are gonna be exceeded. You know, just to let us know, just to advise. You know, and that's, and I don't know if we need to, I don't want to vote on it, I think, but it is something where if we were advised, I mean, to us, and you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to put X children in this classroom, typically the board would just take it as advisement and you move on, but if for some reason the board chose to, we should know. So do we need to just be advised? Do we want to write that here, that just to be advised?
Administrative regulations have got to be in board policy.
Administrative,
We're asking for it.
truthfully, here's my problem, the administration, all deference to, you know, current superintendent's great, but you never know who you get. Hey, you know, it's not addressed at you, it's, I don't want you to feel that.
I enjoy the comment, it's clear.
But,
It was.
oh yeah, well, because they were great, but, you know, it might not happen. The administrative regs are under the domain of the superintendent. So it might be there, it might not be. And if he didn't do them, it's just an administrative reg that he wrote and so what? Or she wrote, so what? If the board asks to be advised in advance, you know, when those guidelines are going to be exceeded, we'd know, because it also comes down to the budget thing. We typically.
Well, you could put in there with, you know, any variances.
If the guidelines are to be, you know,
Any variances to be, you know, either approved by board or shared or whatever you want to call it.
right, the board is to be advised of any instances where the class size guidelines would be
I
exceeded.
think it's fine.
I think we get that anyway.
You do get
But
that.
we do.
But
I understand where you're going.
it doesn't mean that you always will.
Yeah, that's fine.
From you, we would.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. So with or without this thing.
That's
Yes,
fine.
you will.
Exactly. I just wanted to have, you know, somewhere, where do you already have the class size guidelines? The class size will be determined by the board with superintendent, designated administrators and principals, and then after that, it just becomes that, in any instance, maybe a little longer, in any instance where the class size guidelines would be exceeded, the board will be advised. In any instance where the class size guidelines would be exceeded, the board will be advised. That just gives us a chance to, probably just let it pass, but normally, no,
Notified?
advised. Yeah. We're promulgating law, do you know that one?
That one I know. Practicable, don't know.
As soon as practicable.
And now everybody knows it.
No, it's,
Everybody knows I don't know.
that's a lawyerly word. Yeah,
Good thing I didn't get my diploma from North.
Yeah, like I said.
They covered that in 11th and 12th grade.
Let's see, where are we?
131.
Yeah, I know, I was trying to
You
see
haven't seen me.
in terms of what our agenda was, I was trying to hold this to an hour.
You haven't seen my Twitter
We're
feed
at
yet.
131, survey's good to continue?
So yes, sir.
Okay, just for, let's try and wrap it up another 20 minutes.
I'm good.
131 is religion in schools, and as we go through this, and Barry walked us through this, what I'm interested in this one is that it talks about, it is written strongly in the affirmative about what it will be doing. But the one thing I notice is that there is no prohibitions here about what we will not be doing during, and maybe I'm just not seeing it, so as we talk about it, let's look for those, which is I don't want, in a class, anyone proselytizing or promoting their religious views as superior or better than or denigrating any other.
I kind of got that in here.
I see that about study about religion should be objective.
Yeah, I got the spirit of that, but then in some of our other policies, don't we cover what they can't be doing relative to religion or politics or?
I just want to make sure that things hang together, you know,
Yeah,
I
that's-
just,
I looked it up because we had a parent who had questioned it, you know.
every time around this year.
Yeah, and this was a couple of, few weeks back, maybe a month ago, and I didn't meet with the parent, it was done with the curriculum coordinator of music and the principal at the high school. And that's what we look at, and that's very clear, which says it's not about, you know, indoctrinating kids to religion, but that there's a historical component to that music within our history. And
We're back.
we are back.
Are we live again?
Okay, yep, came back up.
We're live.
It says we're broadcasting this.
No problem. For those people who are watching this, we had an interim break as the network went down. We largely ended our conversation, and now we're resuming with a discussion of policy 131, religion in the schools.
Barry, I guess if there is a defined, if we're comfortable with what we had before and it's still something we can look up and you used it as recently as last month, why wouldn't we just keep it? I mean, you know, it gives us some guidance. And
All I care, I mean, I can appreciate the fact that there's significance, you know, I can appreciate the art of the music,
Right.
if you will, in the historical bite, but you know, I want to make sure that, again, we're balanced from a number of different perspectives, you know, whether it's religious or cultural or whatever. So I don't know if by leaving that out, that helps us or hurts us in regards to balance. I don't know the answer. I think they're great, but we're largely leaving it up to the discretion of a teacher, which I'm probably a little bit less comfortable at the teacher level than I am kind of at the district level. Does that make sense?
You know, coming on the heels of some of the discussion around diversity,
Yeah.
I want to be careful about persons who think, you know, it's not a diverse group that we're dealing with as our instructional staff.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going.
And
Well, it's funny because the word diversity just popped into my head when I was thinking about a possible second sentence, which would be something maybe to the effect of the board encourages the district share with our students a diverse
I wonder about the word sacred, and here's one, honestly, talking diversity. You know, a lot of the music that accompanied the Underground Railroad was, if you listen to it at a surface level, was religious. I wouldn't say it was sacred, but it was religious.
but it was actually
messaging. It was actually how to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
You know, so I want to be careful about, you know, is it sacred? It's.
Having just experienced last week was concert week in the district.
Right.
It always is.
Yes, it always
As it always is. And I saw a lot of diversity. Now, I mean, I'm sure someone else could say it wasn't diverse enough, but when you're singing or playing 4 songs, you've got a limited form.
Yeah.
How much diversity you can pull off, but.
That statement that's provided through the National Music Education, it's a pretty lengthy document, but they even cite what was a 1971 Chief Justice's statement about the use of that in schools and list those as stating that, you know, if schools can answer these 3 questions, then it likely meets the legal requirements. You know, they go through and cite the kinds of music that would fit within this, the Hallelujah Chorus, you know, Handel's Messiah, those kinds of things that are, you know, have some historical reference within the U.S. and why those things should be considered part of the program. So they list here what it is we've followed for as long as I can remember. Yeah. So again, they took it out because their terminology was it just seemed too vague, is what PSBA said. No,
Yes, I know,
but it
but it's
references
very
this,
specific.
Yeah, and this is
Yeah.
not vague. So I think the statement they were referencing is not vague because it's pointing you directly to a very specific, you know, context of what and what shouldn't be included.
And if we had a link, that should cover it.
I'm just trying to give our staff some coverage and guidance.
Yeah, I would like it not to be out because
I would like it not to be out for the same reason. I mean, it's just
So what do we want to do here?
Well, I would just reference back to what was in the previous policy, and I think like Mr. Tate said, we could add, it's right here, it says use of sacred music, literature.
I mean, you can fix that later if you want, Matt. But yeah, we want to put the link in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very thoughtful
Yeah,
statement that we were just looking at
On
on their
the-
website, yeah.
and it just gives all our staff a little bit of coverage and guidance.
Versus the music capital, educators.
Yeah, it gives a really clear answer. If someone says, well, does this qualify or not? You just go to that page.
And I'll send you the link.
Look at number 10. This one should be descriptive. I like this one is non-confessional. Conducted in an environment free of advocacy. So that goes to that free of advocacy. Non-confessional is I was trying to come up with another word, which is not, rather confessional, it's almost non-testimonial. Confessional comes to a different mindset as testimony.
That's not in the new policy, that was in.
No, that's the old policy, I'm
That's the old
sorry,
policy.
yeah, I'm sorry. All right, Andy Blunt.
Non-confessional is in the new policy.
Is it?
It says non-confessional.
It does in there too? Okay.
does.
Which is an interesting.
Yeah, the top of the second page.
Okay, it is in there, okay.
But I would also like ask to include the word non-testimonial. Confessional, it gives one perspective. Testimony, it's people give testimony.
I was gonna say impersonal, but
And this was Council Rock's language anyhow, so this was from the old policy.
Process
That's right.
is
It's not there, right?
Say that 4 times.
You want me to change this?
I don't know if you want to change your non-confessional, non-testimonial, just add non-testimonial if you would. Because people that confess what their experience has been, and that's not what I'm looking at. The school, me, Scott Jones, and Joan Petty, and we would have. No, it was President Catholic, but it was very much the odd man out. So I want to be sensitive.
yeah. Good point. Home education.
Now, this, actually, Mark asked that we cover this at a later time. Is there a new change in law? Now, he was concerned there were some changes in law. Is there a time element on this? Anybody know? On the home education program one?
This is just part of
It's
the,
just rotational.
this is just part of the process we're going through to revise
I
policy.
mean, we're following what the
The
new state requirements are, so really, even if it's counter to what the board policy says, we're kind of stuck, since they've changed how we monitor those
You want
programs.
to, based on Mark's request, table this.
Mark has some personal interest in this and this is a little more detailed than some of the other ones have been, so let's.
So we'll do 137 and 137.1.
Yeah, why not? We'll hold those off tonight.
I don't know.
If that's all right.
I'm okay with that.
Yes, did Dr. Foster have some comments on this one?
Dr. Foster had a comment. Let's look. Let's find
I think he deferred to Mr. Bialik.
He said, let's talk to Mr. Bialik, but Mr. Bialik said no, because Mr. Bialik knows how to speak for himself. So, asked me to defer it, and it seems reasonable.
Okay.
Should jump to 140.1 then?
Extracurricular participation by cyber charter students.
This is entirely new, is it not?
Correct. So in short, what happens is that, and we talked about it a little bit when we were talking about the interscholastic athletics and extracurriculars. The law requires us to permit charter and cyber charter students who do not have the extracurricular activities available to them at their charter school if they are residents of Council Rock to participate in our programs. There are some components that are a little bit different than homeschooling. We can assess a fee for that because the district reimburses the charter school for their attendance at that charter school. We have had some, but very limited. We've not assessed fees for that.
Do we have charter school students?
We have students in cyber charter, mainly
In cyber charter.
but also in
Okay.
charter, yes, we do have students in both.
Okay.
Not in any large number, and a very small percentage of those ever requested to participate in our activities.
But we follow state law.
Correct.
Yes, just codifies that.
But I guess my question is, first, 137.1, which is extracurricular participation by home education students.
Correct.
And then we're looking at extracurricular participation by charter or cyber charter students. Can we not roll these together somehow to make an appropriate melange that the administrator, a teacher or staff who are looking at a student who is a non-student participant in extracurricular activities would look at one and understand how to handle it. The other thing, truthfully, was the extracurricular participation by charter cyber. Again, these are law, and we're covered by that already. So unless we need to come up with an interpretive statement in here, we're already covered. Unless we're required to have it as our own policy or provide some interpretive statement to it, I don't see.
And I will tell you that there's nobody that participates. Every building calls me as soon as they get a request from a homeschooled student or a charter family that asks for participation, regardless of the level. They call and say, is this permissible? And, we go through the requirements and make sure that we follow them.
All right, I will find out whether or not this is.
Good. Yeah, policy, if it's simply a regurgitation of state law.
And look, sometimes you need to have an interpretive statement, that gives our bent on something,
I would suggest that 143 and 144, which we haven't even talked about, fall into that same purview. Do we need those? I mean, they regurgitate state law. I mean, completely.
They're brand new.
This looks like the statute.
Yeah, I have a feeling, just from having worked in this state a little while, that 143, I'm gonna guess, probably has some root that you have to do something locally around it. Which is just like the old beeper law. We have a beeper policy, because state law said you had to have a beeper policy.
And that could be, I mean, it's, I don't think we have any persistently dangerous rules.
Thankfully not.
What a brand new, so they wouldn't have. New policy.
So you'd like me to defer 143 and 144 as well?
I don't know if we can certainly, I wasn't suggesting we didn't talk about them, I just would like to know if we need them.
Yeah, are those all the criteria that are set? Those are state law?
I believe
That
so,
was my question, was who sets the criteria to define?
because these are new, these don't exist, I mean, these are in our policy handbook as it is now, so
Yeah, these are what
this is what
they
PSBA
submitted to us. PSBA submitted these to us.
Right, but so these, how they define a persistently dangerous school, is that just their recommendation or is that state law?
Well, there is state law that defines it. I'd have to cross-reference it and see if they
Yeah, 'cause
use
I-
the exact language or they.
Yeah, so my question goes back to policy that gives us the ability to control our destiny a little bit more. That's great.
Oh, that's great, yeah.
If it doesn't, if it's just state law, then, to Jerry's point, unless we want to provide an interpretation, or because we're required to.
And as you look at this for 144, if you would just get some definition here, student opportunity to transfer. And I'm not sure if that is meant to be, must be offered an opportunity to transfer to a safe public school within the LEA. So it would already be, this would actually be intra-district
Correct.
transfers as compared to extra-district transfers. We have multiplicity of schools, that's not difficult.
Robert, do you know those two new policies, they cite as required by unsafe school choice option provision of the No Child Left Behind Act. So that's not, that act is even changed by title, right? So
Sure
I'm
is.
surprised that
Oh,
PSBA,
that's a good catch.
they just slid that in there. So I think we need to ask that question too. because
Absolutely.
You think it would be the ESOP Act now,
Exactly.
right?
if it's even in there.
We'd asked her.
I don't need a body of policies that just regurgitate things
Completely agree.
that PSBA wants.
Especially then later on, we have to keep up with.
Yes, yes.
Because we already fall on this thing, we already have policies about mandatory reporting.
Right.
We already have policies of mandatory reporting.
Right.
So those will come back before this group, once the need has been verified.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Perfect.
We did, and I appreciate it. It took me a half hour longer than I anticipated. Very good. Thank you, Matt, thank you for leading the charge with the technology on this. It is something I need to look into and get a better understanding of, because our old policy chairman had it.
Yeah.
Just give him your silence.
I wanted to hold on to it.
Former, sorry, oh, he's old, he's 61 now.
Thank you very much.
In case anybody was wondering.
All right. Any closing board comments, any closing administrative comments?
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you all for putting up with this.
Any public
Thank you
comment?
for hosting it. Barry and Robert, thank you for being part of it. And Ed, Mark, Mike, whoever you are, Andy, and Mike, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.